As an emergency room doctor at St. Mary's Hospital, I'd seen countless injuries, but something about this particular patient caught my attention immediately. His name was Alexander Mitchell, 28 years old, brought in with a severe laceration on his right forearm. Dr. James Carter, I introduced myself, trying to maintain professional compass despite being struck by his striking blue eyes. What happened, Hirak? Climbing accident, he cried, holding his bleeding arm. The rope caught and cut pretty deep. I carefully examined through wound. It was indeed deep, requiring several stitches, but thankfully hadn't hit any major arteries. As I cleaned through wound, I couldn't help but notice his well-defined muscles. Clearly, he was an experienced climber. You'll need about 12 stitches, I explained. I'll numb the area first. I trust you, Doc, he said, with a slight smile that made my heart skip a beat. As Ward worked on his arm wet act. He was an outdoor adventure guide, leading climbing and hiking expeditions. His passion for nature was evident in the way his eyes lit up as he described his work. You must think I'm crazy, Hellod, getting hurt doing something so dangerous. I shook my head. Actually, I admire it. Most of my excitement comes from dealing with other people. Maybe you need some adventure of your own, he suggested, his eyes meeting mine for a moment longer. Necessary. I finished the last stitch, trying to ignore the flutter in me stomach. All done. You'll need to come back in 10 days to have these removed. Some doctor, he asked, and I swore I detected hope in his voice. I'll be here, I replied, perhaps too quickly. Over the next 10 days, I found myself thinking about Alexander more than I should. I told myself it was just professionalkins, but deep down I knew it was morathon, that when he returned to have his stitches removed, he looked even better thon. I remembered the cut had healed nicely, leaving only a faint line. Looks like you did a great job, Dr. Carter hesitated, as I examined the healing wound. Barely a scar, Jack, I said suddenly. You can call me Jack, he smiled. Then you should call me Alex. As I removed the stitches, our conversation flowed easily. Eli told me about growing up in Colorado's love for the outdoors. Developingly, I shared stories about my journey through medical school and my choice to specialize in emergency medicine. You know, he said, as I finished him, leading a beginner hiking group this weekend. Nothing too strenuous. You should join us. I hesitated. Doctors weren't supposed to socialize with patients. Technically, our doctor-patient relationship was ending with the removal of these stitches. I'd like that. I heard myself say. He wrote down his number and the details for the hike as he left Hetterand back, looking forward to seeing you outside these hospital walls, James. That night, I couldn't sleep thinking about those blue eyes and thy invitation. It had been 2 years since my last relationship ended, and I'd thrown myself into work since then. Maybe it was time to take a chance in something or someone new. The hiking trail Alex chose was about an hour outside the city. When I arrived that Saturday morning, he was already there greeting the small group of hikers. He brightened noticeably when saw me. You made it, he said, walk in his hiking gear, fitted t-shirt, cargo shorts and boots. He looked even more attractive than in the hospital. Couldn't pass up the chance for some adventure, I replied, trying to sound casual. The hike was beautiful, winding through forests, and alongside a Cricolix was an excellent guide, pointing out interesting plants and wildlife. Mackingser. Everyone was comfortable with Thepis, but what struck me most was how often he found reasons to walk beside more shoulders, occasionally brushing Sodo. Carter, he said quietly during one sap moment, is this adventurous enough for you getting there? I smiled though. I notice you're being extra careful with that arm. He laughed. Well, I have a reputation to maintain. Can't keep showing up in your that would be unprofessional of me to hope you'll otherwise, wouldn't it? Our eyes met. Answering electric passed between us. The moment was broken by another hiker asking Alex a question about the trail ahead. After the hike, as the group dispersed, Alex approached me. At my car, there's a nice coffee shop in town, he said. If you're not in a rush. We ended up spending 3 hours in that coffee shop talking about everything and nothing. He learned that he'd come out to his parents in college, that his sister was his best friend, that he traveled to 17 countries. I told him about growing up in Boston, my decision to become a doctor, me last relationship that ended because of me ex couldn't handle my unpredictable schulch. It takes a special kind of person to understand the demands of being a doctor. Alex said thoughtful. Late nights, the emergencies, the emotional toll. Speaking from experience, he shook his head. No, but I'd like to learn. The directness of his statement took my breath away. Alex, I know there are complications. He continued the whole doctor-patient thing, but technically, I'm not your patient anymore, and I'd really like to take you to dinner. I should have hesitated longer. He should have thought about the potential complications, the hospital gossip, the implications. Instead, I found myself saying, I'd like that too. Our first official date was the following Friday. Alex picked me up after my shift, and I was grateful. I'd had tomato change out of my scrubs. He took me to a small Italian restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. I hope you don't mind, he said. As we were seated, I wanted somewhere we could talk without worrying about running into anyone from the hospital. The consideration touched my over wine and pasta. We delved into each other's lives. Alex told me about his first climbing accident at 19. That had nearly scared him away from the sport. What made you go back? I asked. The realization that fear shouldn't stop you from pursuing what you love, he applied his eyes, holding mine. Sometimes the best things in life require taking risks. Later, as he walked me to my door, there was a moment of tension, that delicious uncertainty before a first kiss. Then, Alex stepped closer, his hand gently cupping my face. I've wanted to do this since you first stitched up my arm, he murmured before pressing his lips to me. The kiss was perfect, soft yet passionate, tentative yet sure. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathless. Walled. It'd be too forward to ask you out again tomorrow, he asked, his forehead resting against mine. I have the night shift, I regretfully informed him. Lunch then before your shift. I smiled, pulling him in for another kiss. Lunch sounds perfect. The next few weeks passed in our whirlwind of stolen moments between my hospital shifts and Alex's gotten schedules. We had lunch dates in the hospital cafeteria, quick coffee meetings between his tours, and then whenever our schedules aligned, proper dates that left him feeling more and more certain that this was something special. On a particularly memorable evening, after a grueling 12-hour shift dealing with a major car accident, I found Alex waiting outside the hospital with takeout from me favorite Thai place. You looked exhausted in your last text, he explained. I thought you might need this. We ended up on my couch, me still in my scrub, sharing pad Thai and telling each other about our days. I described the difficult decisions he'd had to make during the accident victim's treatment. Alex listened attentively, his hand running soothingly through my hair. How do you do it? He asked softly. How do you handle having people's lives in your hands? I leaned into his touch honestly. Some days are harder than others. Today was rough. Wellest, one of the patients, without a word, Alex pulled me closer, letting me rest my head on his chest. The steady beat of his heart was comforting. You know what amazes me about you, he said after a while, your capacity to care, even after everything. You see, you still care, sedably. I looked up at him, touched by his understanding. The kiss that followed was different from our previous ones, deeper, more intense, filled with need and emotion. Stay, I whispered against his lips. Stay the night. His eyes searched mine. Are you sure? In response, I stood up, taking his hand and leading him to my bedroom. That night we made love for the first time, our bodies moving together with a passion that took my breath away. Alex's touches were both gentle and passionate, his kisses alternating between tender and demanding. Afterwardly, in his arms, I felt more content than I had in years. I think I'm falling for you, I admitted softly. He kissed my temple. I think I fell for you the moment you started stitching up my arm. The next morning, waking up to find Alex still there watching me with those incredible ball eyes, felt surreal. Good morning, Dr. Carter, he smiled, pressing a kiss to Miss Holder. Good morning, Mr. Mitchell, I replied, pulling him closer for a proper kiss. We started spending more and more time together. Alex began keeping some cloths at my place, and I found myself looking forward to coming home to find him. They're usually cooking something delicious or working on his guide routes at my kitchen table. However, a relationship wasn't without its challenges. My unpredictable schedule meant cancelled dates and interrupted mints. There were nights when I'd get called into emergency surgery just as we were settling in for dinner or morning shin. My pager would go off before dawn, but Alex never complained. Instead, he'd pack up our interruptedness and bring them to the hospital for me to eat. Between patients, he'd leave encouraging notes in my scrub pockets. When I had particular difficult cases, he'd be there with understanding and supper. Tony, night after a successful but complicated surgery that had kept me at hospital for nearly 20 hours, I came home to find Alex asleep on my cush medical journals spread around him. What's all this? I asked, waking him gently. He blinked sleepily. I was reading trauma surgery. I wanted to understand more about what you do. In thought moment, my heart swelled with emotion. This man who spent his day scaling mountains and leading adventure spent his evening studying medical texts just to better understand my world. I love you. I blurted out the word escaping before I could think better of it. His face broke into a brilliant smile. Love you to James so much. As our relationship deepened, we've new challenges. The hospital gossip mill had finally caught wind of our relationship, and while most of my colleagues were supportive, there were some who questioned the appropriateness of dating a former patient. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, my closest friend in the pulled me aside one day. James, you know, I support you, but be careful. Dr. Thompson has been asking questions about how you Talix. Dr. Thompson was the head of the ER department, known for his traditional views. The next day I found myself called in his office. Dr. Carter, he began, his expression stern. I understand you're dating a former patient. Yes, sir, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Alexander Mitchell, he was treated for a laceration, and our relationship began after his treatment was completed. He studied me for a long moment. You're one of our best trauma surgeons, James. I'd hate to see your judgment questioned. With all due respects, my personal life has never affected me professional performance, and it never will after a tense discussion. He finally see that it stays that way. Fate vening, I told Alex about the meeting we were at his apartment making dinner together, or rather, he was teaching me how to make his grandmother's lasagna recipe. Maybe we should be more discreet, suggested, concern evident in his voice. I put down the cheese I was grating and turned to face him. No, I'm not hiding what we have, as long as we're professional about it. They can't do anything. He smiled, pulling me close. Have I told you how sexy you are when you're... The lasagna was slightly overcooked that night, but neither of us mended our different careers. Continued though present challenges. Alex's guiding work often took him away for days at a time, leading expeditions into remote areas with no cell service. Meanwhile, my erratic hospital schedule meant isometums wouldn't see him for days. Even when he was in town, one particular difficult period came when Alex landed a prestigious guiding opportunity, a month-long expedition in the Rockies. It was an amazing opportunity for his career, but the timing coincided with a crucial period at the hospital, as we were prepared for a major trauma center certification. The night before he left, lay in bed, my head on his chest, as he played with my hair. I'm going to miss this, he murmured. The bed, I teased. You idiot. He laughed, then grew serious. Eve, never felt this way about anyone before, being away from you for a month. I propped myself up to look at him. Well, make it work. You'll be amazing on this expedition, and I'll be here when you get back. Promise. During his absence, we communicated through satellite phone when possible, and wrote old-fashioned letters that would be delivered whenever his group reached designated check-ins. His letters were beautiful. The landscapes he encountered and how each sunset made him think of May. Threw myself into work, taking extra shifts to keep busy, but every time an accident came into the ER, my heart would stop until I confirmed it wasn't from his expedition. Group night, he returned. I was in surgery, dip into a complicated procedure. When he got home, he came straight to the hospital, waiting in my office until I finished. When I finally walked in at 3 o'clock, be exhausted but successful. Finding him there felt like coming home. Welcome back, I said softly. He crossed Ed's room in 3 strides, pulling Minto a passionate kiss. God, I missed you. Barely made it back to my apartment to keep our hands off each other that night. Our lovemaking was intense and emotional, a month of separation fueling our desire. Afterwards, we lay tangled in the sheets. Alexstress, the tired lines around my eyes. You look exhausted. Have you been taking care of yourself? I hadn't really. The combination of extra shifts and missing him had left me running on coffee and determination. I'm better now that you're here, I said honestly. He kissed my forehead. Move in with me. I blinked, surprised. What? Or I'll move in here. Care which I want to come home to you every night I'm in town. He wants to take care of you when you're exhausted from saving lives. I want this all the time. The decision to move in together wasn't taken lightly. We spent weeks discussing logistics. His apartment was closer to the climbing centers, where he often taught, but mine was walking distance to the hospital. In the end, we chose my place, with Alex converting the spare room into a home office, where heckled plan. His expedition's moving day was chaotic but fun. Alex's sister Emma came to help, and watching them bicker good-naturedly over where to place furniture reminded me of how much I'd come to love his familiarity. Ed welcomed me warmly from the start. His mother, Linda, particularly pleased. Her adventure-loving son was dating a doctor. Just promise me you'll keep him safe, she'd said during our first meeting. Mom, Alex had groaned. I'm pretty sure James has seen enough cleavage injuries to want to keep me safe anyway. As we settled into living together, we developed our own rhythm. Alex would wake early to go climbing or prepare for his tours, always macking in our coffee for when I got up. I'd come home from night shifts to find breakfast waiting, even if he had to leave it in the fridge. With a loving note one morning, about 3 months after moving in together, I woke to find Alex sitting on the edge of our bed, looking troubled. What's wrong? I asked, Asked instantly alert. He handed me his phone, showing an email. It was an offer to lead a expedition in New Zealand, a dream opportunity for any climbing guide. This is amazing, I said, even as my heart clenched at the thought of such a long separation. I'm not going to take it, Hest, firmly. I sat up. Alex, you can't turn this down. It's an incredible opportunity. I can't leave you for 6 months, hey? I cued his face in my hands. Listen to me, this is your dream. We'll figure it out. Can do video calls, and maybe I can take some time off to visit halfway through. He leaned into my touch. You'd doth it take time off for you, of course. This smile that lit up his face was worth any sacrifice. We spent the rest of Themering planning how we'd manage this separation, and by the time he had told it for work, he was excited about the opportunity again that evening. I was in there when a severe trauma case came in, a young rock climber who'd fallen from a significant height. As I worked to save the patient's life, I couldn't help but think of Alex, of how this could be him someday. The surgery was successful. Beauty left me shaken when I got home. Alex was waiting up, sensing something was wrong from my brief text earlier. Want to talk about it? He asked, pulling me in Totic's arms. I told him about the patient, about my fears. Sometimes I think about getting a call that you're being brought into Maya and I. James, he interrupted gently. I can't promise nothing will ever happen to me, but I can promise that I'm always careful, always focused, and having you in me life gives me one more reason to come home safe. We made love that night with an intensity born of fear and reassurance. Each touch a promise, each kiss a declaration of love. The next few months were a whirlwind of preparation for Alex's New Zealand expedition. I threw myself into research about theory he'd been learning about the medical facilities nearby, making sure he'd hold the necessary vaccinations and medications 2 weeks before his departure. Surprised him with a romantic weekend getaway to a mountain cabin. As we sat on the deck, watching the sunset, sharing a bottle of wine, Alex turned to me with serious expression. I've been thinking, he said, taking my hand, when I get back from New Zealand, would you consider making this official? My heart stopped. Are you asking what I think you're asking? Asking, he smiled nervously. Maybe. I mean, I know we can't legally get married in every state yet, but we could have a ceremony. I want to commit to you, James. I want everyone to know that here, my person, my family. Tears welled up in my eyes as I looked at the man I loved silhouetted against the setting sun. Yes, I whispered, yes, I want that too. Alex pulled me into a kiss that tasted of wine and happiness and promises. We spent the rest of the weekend making plans, not just for a ceremony, but for our future. Together, we talked about buying a house someday, about the possibility of adopting children, about growing old together. The night before Alex left for New Zealand was bittersweet. We'd prepared everything, his gear was packed, his itinerary was set, and we'd had a detailed communication schedule planned out. Still, saying goodbye at the airport was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. 6 months, he reminded me, holding me close. It'll go by fast, be safe. I whispered against his neck. Come back to me, always. The first month without him was the hardest. I threw myself into work, taking extra shifts. Toki, busy Sarah, noticed and started forcing me to take breaks, dragging me to the cafeteria for coffee. You're no good to your patients if you work yourself to exhaustion, she scolded. I know, I sighed. I just miss him. She squeezed my hand. Of course you do, but he'd want you to take care of yourself. Our video calls became the highlight of my weeks. Despite the timid difference we made at work, Alex would tell me about the magnificent landscape she was exploring, and I'd share stories from the ER. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence, working on our respective tasks, while simply enjoying others' virtual presence. 3 months into his trip, I managed to take off to visit him in New Zealand, watching him in his element, confidently leading groups through some of the most beautiful terrain I'd ever seen, made me fall in love with him all over again. One evening, as we sat by a campfire after his group had gone, Alex pulled out a small box. I know already talked about this, he said, painting it to reveal a simple platinum band, but I wanted to do it properly. My heart raced as he got down on one knee. James Carter, you make Me want to be careful to come home safe to build a life. That's about more than just their next climb. Will you marry me? You already know the answer. I laughed through tears, pulling him up for a kiss. He slipped thirring onto my finger. I know, but I wanted see your face when I asked the rest of my visit passed. To quickly but having the ring on my finger made their remaining 3 months more bearable. It was a constant reminder of what was waiting for me, of the future we were building together back at the hospital. My colleagues noticed the ring immediately. Most were supportive though. Dr. Thompson's congratulations seemed somewhat strained, but I found I didn't care any more about others' opinions. What Alex and I had was real and worth any challenges we might face. I started planning our ceremony during quiet moments at work. Alex and I would exchange ideas during our calls, both wanting something intimate and meaningful, rather than elaborate. We decided on a mountain location, combining a loves my love for him and his love for the outdoors. The day Alex was due to return, I was a nervous wreck in the ER. Sarah practically pushed me out the door while my shift ended. Go get your man, she grinned, and tell him he owes me for keeping you sane these past 6 months. I waited at the airport, heart pounding as passengers from his flight began emerging, and then there he was, Tanadant, slightly thinner, but with that same brilliant smile that had first captured me heart in the ER. He dropped his bags and ran to me, lifting me off my feet. Ina, crushing embrace. God, I missed you, he breathed against my lips before kissing me deep. Line it, caring about the people around you. That night, as we lay in our bed, Bodhi sent wind, Alex traced the ring on my finger. 3 months, he said softly. 3 months until I get to call you my husband. I kissed him tenderly. I love you, you nethed. I know, he smiled, and I love you too, Dr. Carter, even if you did use way too many stitches on my arm that first day. I did not, I protested, laughing. Those were perfectly spaced, Hemdi, pulling me closer. Best medical treatment I ever received. As I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I thought Abutho, a simple laceration, had led to the greatest love of my life. Sometimes the best things really do come from talking risks, from saying yes to adventure, from allowing yourself to fall in love with a patient who became so much more. 3 years have passed since our wedding day. We set our vows on a mountain summit at sunrise, surrounded by our closest family. Friends. Alex wore a suit that somehow still looked perfect despite the hike up, and I managed not to worry too much as we exchanged rings and promises. Life hasn't always been easy. We still deal with long separations when Alex leads expeditions, and my work at hospital still means missed dinners and interrupted moments, but we've learned to make it work, to find joy in the small moments, and strengthen our commitment to each other. We bought a house last year, a beautiful place with mountain views, and in our room for the twins we're in the process of adopting the home office. Isno being converted into a nursery, and Alex's climbing gear shares space with my medical journals in what we jokingly call our adventure library. He still comes to the assault, though thankfully not as a patient. He'll bring me dinner during long shifts, or just stop by to steal a kiss between his tours and Miss Jury's. The staff have gotten used to seeing him there, and even Dr. Thompson has warmed up to our relationship. Especially after Alex helped organize a charity climbing event for Thea Hospital's pediatric ward. Every now and then I'll catch sight of my first set of stitches on his arm, now just a faint silver line, and marvel at how one moment in the ER changed both our lives. For it reminds me that sometimes the best treatments aren't found in medical textbooks, and that healing comes in many forms. Alex still teases me about using too many stitches that day, and I still maintain they were perfectly spaced, but we both know that without his stitches, without that moment of connection in a busy era, we might never have found our way to each other. Last week, as we lay in bed planning our next adventure, a combination medical mission and climbing expedition to Nepal, Alex turned to me with that same smile that still makes my heart skip a beat. Yaukno, what Dr. Carter Mitchell, he's sadising the hyphenated name we'd chosen to share. I think that arm injury was the best thing that ever happened to me. He couldn't help but agree. Sometimes the most beautiful stories start with a little pain, a few stitches, and the courage to say yes to love. Ours certainly did, and every day, whether he meant the earth saving lives or at home in Alex's arms. I'm thankful for that fateful day when a handsome climbing with a lacerated arm showed method. The greatest adventures aren't always found on mountain peaks. Some optimism found in the simple act of falling in love.